So what did you do after the war? Did you have any plans?
Well, of course, the plan was I had to stay in the field until the war was over. That was the problem. Many Americans were thinking that the war was over. Just because you won a major battle and the bulk of the British Army has surrendered, that does not mean the war is over. We still have a dangerous adversary in the city of New York with thousands of British soldiers, which we are not going to be able to assault and take the city. We could expend the men and material to do that, but I thought it best that we simply bottle them up and wait it out. Now, I knew this would take a long time. In the meantime, Congress was approaching the British, and they, of course, were interested in talking to sue for peace terms. This process would take 2 years, as it eventually ended up. However, immediately after, I got to spend a little bit of time at Mount Vernon. You know, in the past 6.5 years of the war, I had not spent but 6 days at Mount Vernon, and that was just before we went into Yorktown, where I gathered there with my senior staff officers to discuss the conditions under which we would attack General Cornwallis, to make the plans, in other words. And I hadn't been home in all those years, so that was immediately after. But for the bulk of the war, I moved the Army to New York, and upstate New York, and New Rochelle, in that area. And we sat there to keep an eye on the British in the city itself. And that became an encampment for virtually 2 years, until the peace terms could be worked out.
What role did Benjamin Franklin play in diplomacy?
Well, of course, Dr. Franklin, a good friend of mine, was our senior diplomat. At this particular time, for arranging the peace terms, he was aided by a number of other gentlemen, including Mr. John Adams and Mr. John Jay, and a couple of others, and it was their job to work out the peace terms. However, the British were involved in a lot of intrigue at the same time, trying to drag out the peace terms as long as possible, hoping that we would become so weakened they could start the war effort all over again. Something many people are not aware of is that the Marquis de Lafayette I had returned to France, where he, of course, was a hero, but he got involved in the peace negotiations as well. As a matter of fact, it's more the efforts of General Lafayette that resulted in the British hurrying to the peace table after 2 years had passed by, because General Lafayette had convinced the king to make allies with the Spaniards, and he had gone to Spain and negotiated with the Spanish king and his ministers, and they were going to form a joint Franco-Spanish alliance, and they were going to invade England. General Lafayette's idea was to take the war to England itself. You may be aware that his father was killed fighting the British when General Lafayette was only 2. So he had some personal stake in taking the war to England as well. But he was a devout, loyal member of the American experience, and matter of fact, he declared himself an American. And he wanted to take the war to England itself. Therefore, the English got word of this just as a joint French-Spanish fleet was forming, and they immediately contacted Dr. Franklin and Mr. Adams to come to terms finally over the peace agreement. Now, I think General Lafayette should have been informed, but I know that Mr. Adams did not trust Frenchmen, including General Lafayette. Therefore, he never informed Lafayette of what he was doing, and Lafayette found out after the fact that peace terms had already been signed.
This might be the end of our cycling tour following the Revolutionary War, but this is not the end of the story. Battles continued to be fought after 1781. It was not until the Treaty of Paris in 1783 that Great Britain decided to recognize the new country of the United States.
This is Colonial Williamsburg. Wow, look at this house.
In 1783, George Washington still had to confront problems with angry soldiers in the Continental Army. Congress even had to leave Philadelphia in 1783 because of other angry soldiers. Congress then moved temporarily to Princeton, New Jersey. Bicycles were not invented until after the Revolutionary War, but this same location might well have been a carriage shop. We visited Princeton and cycled through the area. There are many buildings which date back to Revolutionary times, and there is another interesting piece of history. Kopp's Bicycle Shop is perhaps the oldest continuously operated in the United States. At this stage of our program, we like to offer a preview of the next edition in our series. In it, we hope to explain how the War for Independence was financed. This is an interesting tale, as are many true stories about the early development of the United States. Did you know that Ben Franklin traveled to France aboard a pirate ship? And finally, we get to the musical credits. We want to emphasize that we try to use authentic music from the period whenever possible.
I've traveled all over this world, and now to another I go. And I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome the laws and the
This particular piece is very well known and dates back as far as 1664. It has many names because the lyrics were changed over time. It was even played frequently in camps during the American Civil War. The same fortifications at Yorktown were also used during the Civil War, so there are many cases of revisiting history. In order to close out our program on a high note, we have even provided different lyrics for a sing-along.
I've traveled this world all over, and now to another I go. And I know that good quarters await me to welcome old Rosin of Home. To welcome old Rosin of Home. To welcome old Rosin of Home. And I know that good quarters await me to welcome old Rosin of Home. When I met and laid out on the corner, Bill, the voice wanted me head and me toe. With a diamond ring scratched upon them, the name of old Rosin the Bow. The name of old Rosin the Bow. The name of old Rosin the Bow. With a diamond ring scratched upon them, the name of old Rosin the Bow. I feel that old tyrant approaching, that cruel remorseless old foe. I lift up a glass in his honor, take a drink with old Rosin the Bow. Take a drink with old Rosin the Bow. Take a drink with old Rosin the Bow. I lift up a glass in his honor, take